So welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a chance to have a cup of coffee and a bit of time to network. There's so many people here. Great opportunity to just meet new people in the space. I've already met quite a few new people, which is one of the great things about coming to any conference is the actual time you spend networking. We're here to talk about how to invest in quality ICOs, which I think is probably the hottest topic of the moment. We have a fantastic panel here with us, a lot of veterans of the cryptocurrency world, people who've been investors actively in the cryptocurrency space, people who are building infrastructure for the ICO marketplace, people who've come from investment banking and gone over to the dark side of the cryptocurrency world. So welcome, first of all, to all of our panel. I'm going to ask them each to just introduce themselves in a sort of quick 1-minute intro about what they do and what it was that made them, I guess, go over from traditional jobs to being part of the cryptocurrency ecosystem. So let's start with Abasa Phillips of Zilla.
Hi, see if you can hear me. I'm Abasa. I'm American, but I've been in Tokyo for the past 15 years. I come to the crypto world from the payment industry, and I fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole in 2011. Started buying Bitcoin when it was $8 per Bitcoin, and how about now? Okay, are you good? Can you hear me? All right, good. So I've come from the crypto space, from the payment world. I've been involved in cryptocurrency since 2011. I was buying Bitcoin very early on, and I fell in love with the technology, and it just kind of went from there.
Hen?
I'm Hen. My career has mainly been in enterprise IT consulting. Okay, can you hear me better? Perfect. Speaking to my mic here. So my career has been in enterprise IT consulting for Fortune clients. Spent years working at Deloitte and helping companies with enterprise level transformations to serve their business goals. And my interest in cryptocurrencies really accelerated about last year once I started studying the smart contracts disruption or potential disruption of Ethereum, where any traditional service where you have a third party playing a middleman type of role would be disintermediated. So at that time, Ether was trading around $10 per Ether. It's a really good time to get in hindsight, and I started investing. Then this year, I really started attending different conferences, connecting with different thought leaders, starting to work closely with projects in a similar consulting kind of framework, helping them with their raise goals, creating mastermind communities with different investors, and helping with community building and engagement. And that's pretty much what led me to step down from my career and get involved in this space full time, and help projects with everything from launching an ICO to even post-ICO ongoing milestones.
First thing I'm going to do is say, can you hear me? Sounds like a sound check. Yep. Thumbs up? Okay, great. No? Yes? Okay. Hi, I'm James. I'm hoping you can hear me. Thank you. I am the founder and CEO of Oddup. We rate startups, and in a very short way, why we're in the crypto space is that we actually have distribution deals with a lot of big names such as Thomson Reuters and Bloomberg, and the one thing they're all asking us is for ICO data, crypto data, and everything of the sort. So we're currently in beta form on our platform, doing both an index on coins and ICOs, as well as in capturing the top 100 ICOs and coins on the planet. So that's going to be launched later in this quarter. How I got involved in crypto was I got involved as a bet 6 years ago when someone said, I'm doing cold storage on Bitcoin. And I said, this is BS. And he said, put $1,000 down, and if you don't make any money in the next 5 years, I'll give you $1,000 back. So I put $1,000 down. So he was right, I was wrong, but I'm happy that he was right. the way I'm seeing the space, I guess, from our perspective and my traditional background is I'm ex-banker, don't hold that against me. I'm also an angel investor, so I've invested in a lot of startups, made some great returns, lost a lot of money and did both of that. So that's the sort of the space that I'm in, and I'm also investing in some ICOs at this point in time.
I want to do the same sound check. Can anybody hear me? Yes? No?
Speak louder is what's happening.
Hello? All right. So I'm Richard Ma. I'm the CEO of Quantstamp. And so how I started in my crypto journey was, I've been a programmer, and I was really interested in Ethereum when it came out during the crowd sale. And part of that was this idea of a programmable cryptocurrency, which is really appealing. But the problem is that blockchains are secure, but smart contracts are not necessarily secure, as we saw with the recent Parity wallet hack. And so what Quantstamp is doing is we're building an automated protocol to secure all smart contracts on Ethereum. Okay. Hello? Oh, that's much better. Yeah, and I actually have very strong views on ICOs and what is considered a good and a bad project, which I will share with you. And part of that comes from having run a successful ICO, arguably the most successful ICO of October and November. Yeah, so looking forward to talking about that.
So I think to kick it off, I'm going to actually ask James, because James has been working with startups a long time, not necessarily cryptocurrency startups, but evaluating all different kinds of startups. One question I think that's been running around is the ICO white paper just a complete waste of space, waste of time? Should we evaluate ICOs more as we look at traditional startups rather than seeing them as a separate kind of special phenomenon?
I'll start talking this way. Oh, there's the mic, it's working. Look, it's a really great question because I get this question every day I see an ICO on my Facebook feed and should I invest in it? Is it of value? Now, I think where a lot of miscommunication has been from the general public is that when they look at an ICO, they think, oh, they've raised so much money in such a short time. But they don't actually look at the pre-work and all the work that goes into it. So if I think back at our Series A, which we raised, which was traditional VC investors, I'd like to think that the money that we got at the end of the round is pretty much what a successful ICO is at the end. But you do need to spend a fair bit of time, 3-4 months, doing, a white paper's pretty much like a pitch deck. You want to put more details in it. The one thing that is very clear what's a good and a bad ICO is the level of English in a lot of them. And so one thing in the VC world will be if you need to get a third party to help you raise funds. That is a consistent and obvious sign that your team hasn't got the caliber to build a strong company. So I would be looking at ICOs and startup fundraising in exactly the same way. One thing I'm excited about, though, in this space is that the ICO space and the way we look at it is only going to get better because we were talking last night about, how many new ICOs are on the market today. Now, to put it in perspective, maybe there's 50, 60 a day, maybe 100 being launched every day. If you put it into traditional VCs, there's about 500,000 companies around the world trying to raise money today. So there is so much upside in the ICO space. The one thing, though, we're seeing, though, from a startup versus ICO space is that VCs can get a liquid return faster. And I think that's where a lot of the VCs need to evolve and die. So even though the same fundamentals of a startup fundraise and an ICO should be the same, the liquidity for investors is probably what's more exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I'll come to Abasa now because, one of the issues in the space is that there are so many different token sales, different ICOs going on, and it's great that James is providing data because that's lacking, but also how do we kind of keep all the data in one place? And Abasa was showing me his very cool app last night that he's made. I think it's not live yet, but maybe allowing us to assess some of the fundamentals of an ICO and see all the different ICOs in one place. place. So can you tell us a bit about what you're doing?
Sure.
And what kind of metrics you use for how to evaluate an ICO?
Right. So my platform, Zilla, it's an ICO sort of marketplace app where you can learn about various aspects of an ICO, and it's built around a framework that I use to personally evaluate ICOs when I'm participating in an ICO. So I call it the 4 T's, and it's about the timeline of the project, the team, the token, and the technology. So the timeline, for me, basically, if a project has a workable beta, or so not just a mock-up, not just a white paper, but something I can see actually moving, that just right off the bat, that will interest me a bit more into the project. So that's the timeline, and then I look at the team. So I look if they're trying to build the next generation blockchain, do they have relevant engineers that can execute on that vision? So I look at each member of the team to see if there's any entrepreneurs on the team, because it's quite difficult running a company your first time around. So if there's seasoned entrepreneurs on your team, that's a plus. I take a look to see that team members have worked together in the past. It's very important to me because as you know, there's most companies blow up because there's co-founder issues or internal fighting. And you look at the technology, you see whether or not what they're building, there's a place in the world for it. Is it faster? Is it cheaper? Is it easier to use than what currently exists out there? And then I take a look at the token. What's the token used for? How much are they creating? What's the price of the token? And that sort of thing. And I use that as sort of the basic building blocks of what I look for when I participate in an ICO. So I'm based in Japan, and Japanese typically, they like quirkier projects. There was a few months ago, there was a bar that raised money. They raised like $200,000 through an ICO, and Japan sort of likes that sort of thing. So I noticed that with VC funding, it's very regionalized, but with an ICO, it has the power to, you can raise money worldwide. And I think with that being said, you'll see different regions have sort of different projects that the community is interested in, and I find that quite interesting.
Yeah, I think the way it's shaping the landscape for investment is really interesting, and I actually wanted to ask Hen about that. So you've led me nicely into the next question, which is, you've been an advisor to various token projects. What do the token projects themselves look for in advice? What are they lacking, and what kind of expertise do they need that help them do what they want to do?
What I've seen in my experience is that many projects may have the technical competency to come up with a prototype or product and really discuss the token mechanics in a way that is sensible, but what they can't do is sell that to the world. So community building and engagement, reaching out to different networks and getting the buy-in from marketers, from developers, from investors, knowing how to put everything together that's in the white paper and put together a story that could excite the public and help them stand out from the many ICOs that are coming out on a daily and weekly basis. So I've seen a lot of that in my experience. They're also looking for help with raising funds. They may not understand the kind of token economics that would appeal to an ordinary investor, somebody who's looking at this in terms of what's the best ROI they can get out of this ICO. So what I've really come up with in helping them understand this is similar to Abasa's 4 T's model, but how many tokens do you plan to have in the supply? What percentage will you make that available to the public in the event that any of those tokens are unsold, or what are you going to do with them? Are you going to burn them, which then transfers value to the investors who bought tokens? And also, how much are you looking to raise? So we're seeing now with really good projects that they're actually listening to this feedback, and even during the course of a token sale, they'll reduce a hard cap, even by as much as 50%, we've seen. And that's very appealing to investors because there's a concept in the tokenomics where network values the amount of value that's out there. How much of that is going to be captured by the project? And in the event where we had seen projects that had no product, just a white paper, and raising gobs of money, that leaves the investors with little network value to actually speculate with. And that's the kind of thing you want to avoid. We've seen some pretty high-profile ICOs that have had that kind of model. So it's nice now that we're seeing a sort of, coming back to these lower valuations that are more in line with what should be the value of the protocol. I mean, there's no way of knowing in the speculative phase, but we're kind of moving in that direction.
Thanks. I'm going to come back to the token economics because I think there's more questions on that about how the coins are allocated and the lockup and so on. But just wanted to ask Richard, I mean, you've actually run your own ICO and also you're helping other people. In a sense, you're protecting them by auditing the security of these smart contracts. So what's it like to be involved in ICO? What did you learn from doing it? And on the security side, I mean, obviously a lot of these projects are based on smart contracts. So what are the things that people should maybe be worried about or suspicious of in terms of the security of their investment or their purchase of the token?
Yeah, so I want to kind of give some value to the audience. So during the running of the token sale, I think actually there's kind of 3 points that are pretty important when considering an ICO to invest. Number one is like skin in the game, because like leading up to the token sale, me and my co-founder Steven, we actually spent a long time, like 5 months before, working on a white paper, finding the right advisors who are actually going to kind of be in our corner the whole way and help us the whole way, and also finding the right employees. So like before we really started, we already had 4 PhDs who were signed on to work with us, and they had like combined citations of like 500 citations. I think this like groundwork is actually very easy to look at when you do due diligence on these projects to see how long have they actually worked on this before embarking on the token sale, and like what was their previous businesses. So, and then number 2, I think I see a lot of projects right now that are bringing existing world businesses onto the blockchain. And I think that's too early. Right now, it's kind of like the internet in 1994. And there's still security issues and also scalability issues that in Ethereum that everyone's addressing. So it's kind of too early to be bringing on like Uber for the blockchain. So I think good projects right now are more protocol level projects that are going to improve the adoption. And then I think number 3 is the token economics and the distribution of the tokens. What I'm seeing is that some projects, the distribution is like less than 50% of the tokens are going to the public. If you consider how like a decentralized network and like a trustless network works, is that the public should be controlling a majority of the tokens, in my opinion. So like these projects that have 1/3 of the tokens going to the public, it's not really governed by, like in a decentralized fashion, and that kind of goes against the principles that this was built on, starting with Bitcoin, Ethereum. So I think even just looking at the white paper, looking at the depth of level of thinking that went into like trying to make this a trustless protocol or trustless business, and then looking at their like hard cap and token distribution percentages actually helps a lot to filter out projects, because once you go through those 3 steps, you actually end up with a very small universe of projects. And I'm kind of actively doing this because we're doing security auditing for projects, and I'm seeing about 2 projects a day that approach us to get audited, and we're constantly doing due diligence on this front. And after going through those steps, there's actually very few projects that come out of that, and those generally will be quite successful. So, yeah.
I think Abasa had a follow-up on that.
Yeah, so in our app, like we list ICOs, and I get approached by projects all the time, and he's absolutely right. There's a lack of understanding of what goes into a token sale. We're in the midst of our token sale as we speak. And I think, that the legwork that goes into it, the months and months beforehand in preparing for your token sale is sort of, the general public doesn't really see that. And new ICOs don't see that as well. I get approached all the time for projects to list on our app. And when I look at the token economics, they're planning on raising $100 million. They launched their ICO 3 weeks ago. There's 4 guys on the team. There's no marketing. There's no community. So there's just a strong lack of understanding for how to actually do it. And there needs to be a bit more information. And I think, quite frankly, we need to do a better job of educating startups, not just users, on how to evaluate ICOs, but startups on how to actually conduct a successful ICO.
Yeah, I have a small follow-up on that. It's actually very difficult to do an ICO. You actually need a large staff of supporting people. And the public doesn't really realize this because having gone through it, we had 20 volunteer admins in our community. We had people managing marketing, all this. So it's actually quite difficult.
Yeah, I was reading a piece the other day saying, that perhaps the best investments in tokens are the ones that are securing some kind of infrastructure for the whole ICO process. And until we have that kind of data and the security and all these other parts of the marketplace in place, that maybe some of these other ICOs should be waiting until that's there before they then launch their tokens. I wanted to come back to the whole issue of kind of regulation of ICOs, because obviously we're in this kind of strange hybrid world where we don't really know what's going to happen. And there's been some attempts to define that there's sort of a security type of token, but then maybe there's another type of token that's more like an app coin or a utility token. How do you sort of try to define what falls within those two different camps, if it's possible?
I'd like to start on this one because I'm seeing it from a company now at Series B, where we are looking at tech companies in the blockchain space and how we can acquire them. And from the different types of tokens, the biggest one, which is the biggest hurdle, is of course security. So, one question was asked by a blockchain company to us was, would you acquire us? And we said yes, but we're not going to buy your tokens. And there's no legal reason for us to. And so one of the things that I see as, at the moment, regulation around the world is still so new and people can't sort of grasp it, particularly central governments, is when people lose the money that they think they've made from a token sale. So a lot of the utility tokens where you're getting, vouchers, access to the platform, what have you, are not necessarily assets that own the IP. So any big company that buys you is going to buy the company and the IP. And honestly, if I was in the situation, why should I care about the tokens? Because they're worth of little value for me. So in the ICOs, particularly what we're seeing from a lot of institutional clients is how the regulations stand on people who have store credit. Now, companies can do a lot of things in order to, wipe the value of those tokens out the window, but there needs to be more regulation around the securities framework. I did hear that Austria is sort of leading the pack in this. There's a couple of sort of emerging countries that are looking at it, Gibraltar, particularly in the online gaming space and esports, but a lot of the traditional countries such as the US, Australia, UK are still going to probably be 3 or 4 years behind the curve before they're ready to sort of accept regulations. But at this point in time, there needs to be done. But I go back to Abasa's point, it's all about education. So as long as companies, ICO companies are building, spending 5 months building a great company, then there's going to be less concern from the general public on, what have I bought and, what ownership do I have in this company? Should there be a sale or should something happen?
Yeah, I guess for people that are new to this space, there may be people who want to get into this because they can see it's an interesting opportunity, but is there advice for people to know what to do? Let's say they go and buy some tokens from a token sale. What should they do with it? Should they hold on to it? Should they trade it out into another cryptocurrency? Or should they, how do they know what to do with a token once they've got one or more?
Well, that's a good question. It's really important that people think about liquidity options after an ICO. So once you actually receive your tokens from the project, Your next, big goal is that there's prominent exchanges that have enough volume to give you the liquidity you need to see a return in the event that you liquidate those tokens. But at any rate, it makes sense to store your tokens safely in a hard wallet. That's what I personally do. But I think, going back to the point about regulation, I think that's something this space badly needs right now. We still haven't really seen best practice emerge and had the kind of failures that we're going to need to have to develop the lessons learned to know how to kind of move this space in a proper direction. And there's a lot of people that are going to get burned. I think 2018 is going to be a very interesting year. And the problem is, even with exchanges now starting to adapt to regulation that hasn't come out explicitly, but has kind of made some suggestions, like the SEC report on the DAO, which established that that token is a security token, and that was the infamous hack that led to the forking of Ethereum. But even that alone, just a report of an opinion, with no enforcement action taken, has already seen exchanges now taking due diligence efforts to make sure that they're not listing any tokens that could be deemed as a security, not just then, but later on, because the SEC has retroactive enforcement capabilities and long-arm jurisdiction. So all it takes is one American purchasing a token to have a business potentially shut down. So I think even with this lack of exchange support, a lot of people that are taking part in ICOs still don't think far enough to think, what do they do after they get their tokens? Are they going to be listed on exchanges? So you could have you will have a situation where a lot of people have these tokens, they can never reasonably liquidate them because no exchanges are going to list them, or no prominent exchanges will. And I think even with these failures, having the result of a lot of people getting harmed, I think we need to put an end to this. So I think it's better to happen sooner than later.
I mean, it's been quite light touch really up till now. I'm actually surprised, having come from the world of public policy before I got into cryptocurrencies, that regulation hasn't been sort of brought in more quickly, or they haven't kind of stamped down on certain things harder, given the amount of money going in and the sort of potential risk.
Just to follow up a bit to what Hem was speaking to, I participate in multiple ICOs up until now, and there's two sort of ways to think about it. And I when I speak about participating in ICOs, I don't really think of it so much of as an investment, and I don't actually say that I invest in ICOs. I participate. For me, it's more on the crowdfunding side. So there's kind of a continuum, right? There's investing, and then there's crowdfunding, and I'm a little bit slightly more leaning towards crowdfunding personally. So if there's a project that I feel will help grow the cryptocurrency community, or I feel that the world needs, then I'm more inclined to participate. And I don't so much think about which exchanges they're going to be listed on. However, obviously, if you're in this world for the 1000x or the 500x or the 100x that's possible, then I think there's nothing wrong with that. And your frame of mind has to be a little bit different. And regulatory-wise, actually, I'm in Japan, and Japan came out with a licensing framework for the exchanges, and I saw what went into that, and that was 4 years of really strong lobbying by the top 2 exchanges in Japan, and the amount of work that went into that was just, meetings after meetings, 4 years. So when I look to the U.S., I'm American, so it's my hope that the U.S. kind of opens up and takes a leadership role in this space, but they just haven't, and it doesn't really look like they're going to be able to be the Silicon Valley of the crypto world going forward. I just don't see it.
I think it was interesting, there was a piece by Laura Shin in Forbes the other day talking about an SEC kind of statement that was made, and it got to the point of asking about decentralized exchanges, and the person speaking just sort of looked quite flabbergasted and shocked, like we hadn't even considered this possibility of what we're going to do about decentralized exchanges, because they may not be under any one jurisdiction. So there's a lot of different aspects to where the regulation focuses on, not just, how we quantify a token, whether we call it a security, but also, how we decide on the legal jurisdiction of something that's decentralized. Maybe we can't even do that. as regulators. I don't think they know the answer to that. I worked with a lot of policymakers, and generally they don't know the answer to that many things. So the industry has to sort of educate those people on what's going on and give them the tools to make those decisions in a better way. I think we have about 10 minutes for questions. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see who's got their hand up. I'm sure we're going to have tons of questions for the panel, so if you let us know if you have a specific question for a specific person or just a general question for the panel, that would be great. I'll see if I can see anybody. I think we have a lady there with her hand up. Just waiting for the mic. Go. If you can also just stand up maybe and say where you're from, that would be great so we can see you.
Hi, I'm Diana from Australia. Just a question about, so Ethereum, the ICO boom started 2013-14. With NEO, we've seen that since the very first ICO, KYC policies have been put in place. And so what do you think the implications of that will be in terms of, say, the success of the platform? Adopted by the masses and also security-wise?
Yeah, you know, we've watched, you know, so I guess around June, July, there weren't that many projects that were doing KYC on participants, but now the bulk of them do, and you know, they're getting in front of regulations, and you can see going forward, like our company is based in Singapore, which requires it. Japan will require it. China shut ICOs down, but obviously if they ever open it up again, I'm 100% sure that they will require it. So going forward, I'm pretty sure that most jurisdictions will require KYC. So it's about, you know, as an ICO, how do you prepare for that and get in front of the regulations?
Yeah, I mean, I think getting ahead of the regulations is key. It also provides comfort to policymakers that the industry wants to do things in the right way.
Yeah, I have something to add. I think like there's a fundamental reason why projects should have KYC, and it's to future-proof the project. Like if you imagine these things are going to get delivered in anywhere between 6 months to 3 years, in that time there could be a reason to return funds to the original investors, and you need to know their identities to do that. So. It's pretty important actually to have KYC processes. Yeah.
I think we have a question from a chap here in the middle who's had his hand up for a while.
Eugene from South Africa. Thank you, panel. Very interesting discussion. Richard, you mentioned earlier that the type of projects that will now be worthwhile are the ones that will assist with stronger protocols to ensure wider adoption. This might be a cheeky question, but any particular current ICOs or projects which the panel are interested in?
I've been looking at a couple. These side chain projects are pretty interesting. Like I actually invested in Raiden. It's a pretty great project. And right now I'm looking at one called Gold Network. It's also a side chain project for like mobile. So we're looking at that one, and we're also thinking of auditing that one. Yeah, what about you
You
guys?
should just say this doesn't constitute official investment
This does not
advice.
constitute investment advice.
Well noted.
For all of the speakers, I'll just say that as a general disclaimer.
I've made a sabbatical in December not to do any ICOs. I always think that, particularly leading up to Chinese New Year, there will be not the great returns that I see, but one thing that I'm heavily involved is the currency hedge. I also think, and you probably need to quote me on this one, that we'll probably see 20,000 on Bitcoin by Chinese New Year when everyone gets their bonus. So I know I've just done a soundbite there. Sorry, CNBC. But yeah, so I'm looking at currencies at least until March.
Disclaimer, this is not financial advice. Just wanted to put that out there. I recently invested in Zilla, which is high-speed blockchain that's meant to bring scalability solution to the Ethereum network, because Ethereum in current state just really isn't scalable for, you know, the kind of everyday applications we would want out of it. They did a pretty big reduction in their hard cap leading into the ICO, and that was also the lockup. They had shortened the lockup to a much shorter period of time. So there was a lot of demand, and what I found in my experience is when there's scarcity around an ICO, and the idea is one that many people think is a valid use case, it tends to do well in the short term. But like I said, not financial advice.
Yeah, I like our project, Zilla.io. Take a look.
It's really great, apparently, available in all good exchanges.
Yeah, there's a few projects coming up that I'm interested in as well. Yeah, I'll mention them on our social channels at some point, but yeah, I'll leave it for then. But I would say Bitcoin 2018, by this time next year, we'll probably see it at $100,000. That's where I think it's at.
Otto.
I'm going to try and take 2 more questions in a group if I can. So there's someone here at the front, and then if we have someone from this side of the room, just to not leave out this side of the room. I don't see any hands up over there. Anyone? Someone at the back there, right at the back.
Hi guys, my name is Bas Offers from px.com and Rev Media. I'm based in New York. I have a question about the thoughts of the panel on current and active profitable businesses doing an ICO instead of doing a Series B or Series C funding, and what your expectations are for 2018. And in addition, what are your thoughts on the tokenomics of a company doing so? So thinking about actually offering those tokens for a discounted price, what is the impact on the model of the company that's actually profitable today?
Okay, great question. I'm just going to take one from the back as well, so we have 2 together because we only have a few minutes left. I mean, I think that's a really interesting question. I've had some companies coming to me to talk about doing ICOs that are not in any way in the cryptocurrency space. And it's an interesting question whether you can bring those currencies sort of into that world.
Do you want me to answer that first while you get the next question?
Just waiting on a question from the back. Do you have the mic?
Okay, yeah. Thanks, James, for mentioning Austria. I'm Paul from Hero. We did the first ICO in Austria, and I think also one of the first legal in the European Union. And I know Austria is really pushing the regulations. They want to have more ICOs in Austria. And which other countries do you see like they also want to be an ICO country? And if you would start now an ICO, which country would you go for?
Okay, great. So is there a kind of competitive marketplace for ICOs around the world? I think if everyone can maybe give just a quick comment. We only have a couple of minutes left, so I'd love to hear views on both.
I'll quickly answer your question. Every single one of my investors is asking, do your Series B and C as an ICO. Because they want liquidity, even though we're about a $100 million company by traditional VC funds, everyone wants to do that. Because investors want to hit their funds, they want to get their money back for their funds. There is probably in 2018 much better companies, particularly the Silicon Valley crowd coming in, where they'll have good Series B, Series C companies doing an ICO. And that will actually not be led so much by the startup, but by the funds who have invested in the startup. So watch this space, but I can say from personal experience, we get asked this almost every second day from our existing investors to do one. The second question, and I'll pass it to everyone else. Austria, yes. Gibraltar, yes, as I mentioned. I do see a couple of countries putting their heads in, but I can tell you where not to do it. Probably China, Hong Kong, USA, UK, Australia. I think Singapore may take a lead on this one. I'm also very, very interested in what India's doing in this space. Watch that space in India. That could be the game changer.
I'll answer the enterprise blockchain one, because I'm seeing a lot of these projects coming in 2018. They're approaching us now. It's going to be gigantic, and actually, I'm of the opinion that some of them are extremely good, because with blockchain, it actually has the ability to change incentives in existing businesses by adding this like payment system, and some of them actually work. So that's my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the first question, many VCs have startups in their portfolio that are just struggling or on the brink of failure, and actually encouraging any startup that can potentially have a token model for its business to ICO. So, think of it as a rephrasing of Murphy's Law. Any startup that can ICO will ICO. And what we see too is that there's a lot of demand for short-term liquidity. So that's one of the disruptions of the token model. And these equity investors that would ordinarily need to wait 7 or 8 years to potentially see liquidity event in the form of an acquisition or IPO now can get that in a very short period of time. So that's just a very compelling scenario. For the second question, I've been to a couple of jurisdictions that are really just making themselves crypto friendly, Gibraltar being one, and Zug, Switzerland. And I was really impressed by Zug just because of the public-private partnership. They have a Crypto Valley Association and just a favorable regulatory climate, a lot of buy-in from the politicians in Manhattan to make themselves a center of the world for the cryptocurrency space.
You can both ICO and go skiing at the same time.
So I'll be brief. Let's see. On Zilla, we have, I'm absolutely inundated with existing companies who are preparing their ICO right now. It's incredible. Traditional VC is dead as we know it. It's already gone. It's dead. And number two, as a jurisdiction, I would say either Japan or Gibraltar. Gibraltar is looking very nice. So yeah, that's it. To the moon, folks, to the moon.
Thank you. Thanks so much to all the panel.
Thank you.
So I have to stay here for the next panel, so you'll be seeing a bit more of me. Next panel coming up is Protocols of the Future, which I think is going to be a fascinating panel. So looking forward to hearing from all our panel, just making their way onto the stage now. Okay, welcome everybody. This panel is really about next generation protocols. We touched on this earlier on about the problems of existing blockchains and how new protocols are coming on board. I'm delighted to welcome all the panel. We have some excellent technical experts here and people, again, that have been involved in the cryptocurrency space a long time. So on my left, we have Maxim Postnikov, who's the chief evangelist at Universa. Then we have Mance Harmon, who's the co-founder and CEO of Swirls and Hashgraph. We have next Crystal Rose, who joined us just very recently, so delighted to have Crystal here. I think she's just finished her own token sale, so she's been a busy lady, traveling to lots of different countries. And we also have Preeti Kasireddy here, who's a blockchain engineer, and she previously worked at Coinbase, and she's now the lead blockchain engineer of Mercury Protocol. So welcome, everybody. Nice to meet you. I met nearly everybody yesterday. I didn't manage to meet Preeti, so really hope I've pronounced your name correctly. And very nice to meet you. I think we're going to run this panel slightly differently because there's so much new information about these protocols and most people don't really know that much about them yet or how they work. So we're going to kind of follow the panel down, I hope, and get each person to talk a little bit about their new protocol and just explain why they see a need for a new protocol, what's wrong with the existing systems that they're trying to fix. So I think as we organized it, that Max was going to kick off for us.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me be the first one to speak. Is it okay? Do you hear me? Okay, thank you. So I want to talk about the future. But before we start talking about the future, we have to look back into the past. And let's start with the past of technology. In 1885, Carl Benz introduced the whole new technology. It was first world serial automobile. It was called patent Autowagen or something like that. It was legendary. Its impact on the whole world was great, but no one drives it now because, let's admit it, it is slow, it is uncomfortable, it even didn't have the steering wheel, some arm for that. So now we drive modern cars. Let's look at current so-called classical blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum. we should never underestimate their impact in the world we are living currently. But let's admit the obvious. They are slow, they are too expensive, and they are not really smart. And that's why we built Universa, a new generation blockchain protocol. I will not go deep into technical details, I just don't have time for that, but just some points. First, our speed. We can handle, at this point, 25,000 transactions per second. If you compare that to Ethereum, it has below 20. Bitcoin has below 10, you know it. Why do we have such speed? Because we don't store everything in one single blockchain for all. Instead, we have cloud computation, and we allow anybody to have its own private, secure blockchain in the cloud. Universa stores final states of contracts, verifies it. If you want to know more, you can always find me after the panel. We don't rely on a community of untrusted actors, so any random person cannot run a node. That's why then it comes to critical questions of privacy for enterprises or for governments. Governments can always rely that our distributed network is run by certified nodes. It is still decentralized, it is still distributed, but we have some kind of moderation opportunities. Then smart contracts. Okay, Ethereum smart contracts is what we have now, but let's admit, they are not really smart, and they actually are not contracts. In Universa, we have real smart contracts. First of all, it's contract. So if you show it to a lawyer, he can read it. He can actually understand what is it all about. It's not some solidity strings only. And our contracts are smart because they can be written in several languages like JavaScript, CoffeeScript, or even Scala. So basically, our smart contract can be a full-scale application. It can even have a graphical user interface, which is very important. Of course, we thought about money. Through Universa, you can tokenize any asset, and you can tokenize money. You can tokenize Bitcoin, you can tokenize any cryptocurrency, you can tokenize even fiat money, and make smart contracts with them. Our smart contracts can look not only inside the network, they can take information from the outside world. They can take information from your bank account if you allow that. And we are cheap. You know, Ethereum was planned to be cheap, right? But then the token price went up, and it is ruined. We foresee that. That's why our transaction price is stable, and it is 1 cent. For you can have 100 transactions for $1. And this stays the same. You still pay for transactions in tokens, but if token value is $1 million, you have a lot of transactions you can buy for that. The transactions are linked to fiat currency, not to tokens. Tokens are just a way you pay for transactions. By the way, our token's still on sale for some time. And by the way, I can give you some free tokens. If you find me in lobby, I have these cards, and there's a QR code in that. So you can scan it and get your free tokens from me. So, but I can go for hours talking about Universa. I want to say one more important thing. It's not about Universa, it's about future. In our white paper, it is written that we promise to invest some money, and it's a pretty significant amount of money, in education. We are going to build educational centers all around the world to teach students how to work with blockchains. And we want our students to have a choice. They can work with Universa, they can work with Hashgraph, they can work with Neo, they can work with any new generation fast and secure blockchains. So we can't do it alone. We can, but we don't want to do it alone. And we want to form some kind of alliance or some kind of consortium. In my head, personally, I call it friendship. So my appeal is, guys, let's change the world together. Okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Max. I have some questions to ask you about Universa, but I'll come back to those at the end. So
Okay.
I'm going to turn to Mance. Mance is Hashgraph. I heard about Hashgraph myself only a few months ago, I think back in the summer. It's not necessarily exactly a blockchain, but a different kind of distributed system. So I'll leave you to explain to everybody exactly what the Hashgraph is all about.
Okay, great, thank you. Can you hear me? Yep. So if you think about what Bitcoin blockchain was designed to do, it was designed to be a digital currency, a cryptocurrency. And when it was introduced to the market, it was a milestone in computer science in some ways. With Hashgraph, we started, actually Dr. Lehman Baird, my co-founder and the inventor of the Hashgraph, started under the assumption that we were going to create arbitrarily complex distributed applications. In other words, the requirements for the underlying consensus technology were far more stringent than what are required just to accomplish a cryptocurrency. Hashgraph is not a blockchain. Hashgraph is a fundamentally different data structure and consensus algorithm. It's a replacement for or an alternative to blockchain. Generally, it's an alternative to every other distributed consensus algorithm in the market today. There are only a few categories of those kinds of technologies. And Hashgraph is a fundamental advance in computer science in that for the very first time, it achieves two things. One, it achieves the bandwidth limit that is possible for distributed applications. If you have a distributed application, you have a bunch of nodes in the network, each running a local copy of a database. When transactions are introduced to the network, all those transactions have to go to all the nodes. That's the minimum required for bandwidth. With Hashgraph, we add a tiny amount of information on top, basically 2 hashes, if that's meaningful to you. And that's it. No additional bandwidth is required to achieve consensus. Secondly, there is a category of consensus algorithm that goes back 30+ years. We call it pure voting-based algorithms. These aren't practical because of their bandwidth requirement. It's just too onerous. The amount of bandwidth required for this category of algorithms blows up in terms of the number of, it doesn't scale well in terms of nodes and transactions. However, they have some fantastic security properties. They achieve the theoretical best that can be achieved for this category of consensus, distributed systems. It's something called asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance. No one in the market has it. There are BFT, or Byzantine fault tolerant systems, but they're partially synchronous or partially asynchronous BFT systems. And that partially piece of it, it's very meaningful because it means that we've made assumptions that aren't reasonable assumptions about the security of the consensus algorithm. For example, one of the common assumptions might be that botnets or DDoS attacks don't exist in the world. If you're worried about DDoS attacks, then the security is not sufficient. Hashgraph does two things, as I'd mentioned. It achieves the bandwidth limit, and it also is the first time that we have a system that is practical and scales that is asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant. In other words, Hashgraph achieves the fundamental best, the theoretical best you can achieve in a practical way that scales, and it achieves the bandwidth limit. So I'm going to make a really bold statement here. I understand this potentially is controversial. I think that what Lehman has done is he has solved the problem of distributed consensus. 100 years from now, there may be dozens of variants on the Hashgraph, but they will be variants on the Hashgraph because you can't do better than what's been achieved in the Hashgraph. This technology is implemented. We are a company that's a couple of years old. Helen mentioned she only heard about us a few months ago. We haven't been marketing. We have gone after the enterprise market to start, and we have won against major competition for the credit union industry in North America, and we'll be rolling out to the 6,000 credit unions representing 105 million members next year, early next year. And we have a full pipeline of other enterprise customers. So the point is that it's not a white paper. It's real, and it's being prepared to be rolled out.
That's fascinating developments. I think the whole marketplace is shifting, and we'll come back to whether or not these different systems can maybe at some point interoperate with each other. But I want to turn to Crystal. You've been around cryptocurrency industry a long time and the blockchain industry. How do you see these new platforms coming on board and shaping the marketplace?
So I've just completed my ICO, so I'm in a mode of kind of feeling a little bit more relaxed. This is my 7th country in 30 days. And I'd actually really love to get to know the audience and a little bit more of where you're coming from in terms of your knowledge, just because I've been around so many different environments of crypto. Everyone from just starting in blockchain to some of the most saturated ICO markets I've ever seen. So how many people have Bitcoin? And that's basically everyone. How many people have Ethereum? And how many people have an altcoin, so anything else like EOS, Dogecoin? So this is a very, very knowledgeable audience. And how many people are a developer? Anyone coding on the system? So this is amazing. I'm just getting a sort of feeling to see if they're understanding if we need to start with what is the Byzantine general's problem, but clearly not. This is a really sophisticated place, and I'm really excited to see how packed this conference is. I'm impressed with Thailand already, and really, the industry as a whole has moved so substantially. I've been around the blockchain for now, moving on since 2011, starting in Bitcoin when my developers were mining it in my office. Very fortunate to be on the journey, and my company at its heart and soul, Sensei, is an artificial intelligence-based company. We build a communications platform. We know that the blockchain is going to radically disrupt and enable a lot of new technologies, but every industry, so from healthcare to education, but we're at the very core. So right now everyone's building the roads, and I think the protocol layers are what are going to be the foundations that we build on top of. The cars and the buildings, all of that have still yet to even be created. The applications, those layers are what's next, and those are the big opportunities. But I think sitting here, listening to the different protocols speaking, there are a lot of people that are working on attacking this problem, primarily that the transactions are too slow. We are unable to use the blockchain efficiently because it's too expensive. Ethereum gas prices are so high that even though the transactions are marginally more than Bitcoin, we just are still unable to. So we're an ERC20 token, but we have intentions of moving on to another platform as soon as they're ready. We've been on the testnet. Actually, today is the launch of the testnet of EOS. We've been on the testnet of as many of the protocols as we possibly can so that we can understand better. And I think as developers will know, this is a big challenge. You are simultaneously building your product alongside of these theoretical products that are happening. But certainly the protocols are here, and I'm really excited to hear from both of you what is the future.
Thank you, Crystal. Last but not least, we have Preeti. As I mentioned earlier, blockchain developers are in a minority, and female blockchain developers are even smaller minority, so we're very happy that she's here, and I'd love to hear about what you're working on and also the challenges that you face as a real-world blockchain engineer, what problems you come up against.
Yeah, sure. Okay, you can hear me. So I kind of want to talk about my evolution through blockchain, and it'll kind of explain why I'm so excited for the future of the protocols. So I actually started in blockchain as a VC. So I used to work at Andreessen Horowitz, and my first introduction to the blockchain was when we made the investment in Coinbase. I worked with Chris Dixon on that investment, and I was fascinated by blockchain then because I read the Bitcoin paper, and it was kind of sitting in the back of my head. But as a VC investor, I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know what to do with the blockchain, but I kind of kept it in the back of my head for a long time. And then I came back to software development, and I actually joined Coinbase as an engineer. And that's when I got much deeper into the space. And that was around 2016, early 2016. And I don't know if you remember, but like Bitcoin and blockchain was in a lull in 2016, like early 2016. Like I think the price of Bitcoin was like 300 or 400. No one was talking about it. I remember I told my friend that I'm joining Coinbase, and they're like, what is that? And I told them a blockchain company. They're like, why? Isn't the blockchain and Bitcoin dead? But I think there were the few people in the space who had like continued faith in the system, and Coinbase was one of them. And I wanted to join a group of people who were so passionate about this and the future of finance using the blockchain. But to be real, like we were at Coinbase, and the whole thing was like, where are the apps? Like the blockchain exists and Bitcoin exists, but where are the applications? Because that was the premise of why we invested in Coinbase in the first time. It's like Coinbase would be the platform, and there'd be all these applications that get built on top. but there were no applications. And then came along Ethereum. And Ethereum, I think, really kind of promoted this spirit of innovation on the blockchain because it finally made it so easy to build applications on the blockchain with these smart contracts. And it finally allowed developers to come into the space and actually build something without having to understand some of the cryptic languages that you have to use at Bitcoin. And that's when I actually got more into the blockchain development space myself because it just became a lot easier to code for the blockchain. And then because of that, then you start to see more protocols get built outside of Ethereum too. So I think the space has continued to evolve in a very interesting way, and now you're seeing finally a lot of people kind of understand what is the blockchain, what are the limitations of the blockchain, and let's actually build a system that's future-proof 10 years out from now to solve the problem of scalability, privacy, not having formal verification of smart contracts, governance. All these issues are still so open and unsolved that having this innovation finally happen this year is super exciting. And so I'm still continuing to do a lot of development and research. There's obvious challenges that we'll probably go through in this panel. And I'm working on my own project now. A little bit early to say what it is, but I'll share more in the future months.
Thank you so much. I mean, one question that comes up a lot is permissionless versus permission systems. Are kind of open blockchains, if you like, more likely to be successful than private enterprise distributed ledger systems? I'd love to hear the panel's comments on that.
Okay, I can start. We have chosen to make our network permissioned because we know about a lot of issues connected to privacy from governments, from enterprises. Then you say that you are going to store your encrypted data at some random PCs. Your lawyer tells you, no way. That's why we understand that, and that's why we made our network permissioned. You can buy a license, but you can buy a license only in case if you have fast hardware and broad bandwidth. Yes, for some crypto anarchists, this may sound, oh, you're not that much decentralized. But believe us, we do not control that nodes. We just control who can be node and who cannot. And after that, they are free to run our code as they like it. So we are decentralized, but yes, we are not anarchy.
Mans, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So just like there is public cloud and private cloud, because there are different use cases that are addressed by both, there will always be both permissioned networks and public networks. The use cases are different use cases. And I think that this is often sort of a false dichotomy. The public networks will support use cases that are executed and run on permission networks or private networks, and I think that both will be around forever. I think that there are trade-offs, fundamental trade-offs that make one better than the other for different use cases.
I mean, it reminds me a bit of intellectual property debates going back some years now about open source development versus proprietary, that actually the two are not mutually exclusive, and often proprietary solutions get built once the open source development has been done, but these two kind of ecosystems do interact with each other. They're not kind of two separate silos.
They're not. They are often different markets entirely. I mean, the market for permission networks and how a company would go to market to address an enterprise use case is fundamentally different in some ways than how you would go to market to build a public platform, right? But both will exist.
Crystal, come to you.
For the first time in history, developers have an incentive to build on open source platforms. So I think it's important that we maintain distributed, decentralized, open platforms as much as possible, because the incentive still lies there, and that's what is truly going to enable global connectivity. It's going to be what enables access to everyone. Transparency is also enabled there. So I think as long as we can create good systems of governance and we can instill standards of self-governance and self-regulation, open systems are very good. I do see the purpose of having private systems as well, and I think governments are inherently going to want to have that forever.
So do you have a preference, Preeti, private or public blockchains?
As a secret kind of crypto anarchist myself, I'm huge into the cypherpunk movement, but so I kind of am, I'm not super passionate about the permission networks per se. All of my work and focus is on the public blockchain space, but I do think what permission or private blockchains do enable is you can constrain the problem set in a way that allows you to solve, you don't have to worry about things like scalability because you can have every node have more compute power. You don't have to worry about things like privacy and issues that public blockchains have where you don't have control over every single node in the network. With the public blockchain, it's the wild, wild west, and you have to solve for the wild, wild west. With the permission network, you have much more control. And so I think it's a great testing environment almost, and a way to test some of the early use cases of the blockchain in some of the proprietary use cases that you were talking about. But I think for me personally, I'm much more passionate about solving the public blockchain problem.
What about the kind of environmental sustainability arguments about proof-of-work-based blockchains? Because obviously one of the arguments is the Bitcoin blockchain takes up an enormous amount of energy consumption. So do you think that these new protocols have an opportunity to address that by moving away from proof-of-work?
That's a good question. Yes, proof-of-work is a huge energy drain. I think there were stats that I don't remember the exact number, but it does consume a huge amount of energy. And that's why there's a lot of research going into other types of mechanisms to protect a completely decentralized network, things like proof of stake, which, for example, Ethereum is doing a lot of work on. And I think we will have to move to a more reliable, more efficient, more safe consensus mechanism. And you're seeing a lot of research happening in that space right now. And I think something like Hashgraph or IOTA or other types of networks that are moving away from a system where every node processes every transaction to a much more either you split the compute across different nodes or various types of scalability solutions. I think we will move to a different consensus mechanism aside from proof of work. I just don't know what it is. I don't think anyone knows what it is.
I think it'd probably be quite hard to predict at this point, but Max, do you want to come in on that point about proof of work?
Yes, I want to comment about proof of work. I think that proof of work was really great because it helped to involve many people into blockchains. You could know nothing about computing, you can write no string of code, but you can become a miner and whoops, you are involved. You are in crypto family, you are with us. But now, okay, guys, let's admit it. Now mining in what we see in Bitcoin, it's obsolete. We don't need to waste so much energy. We have far more efficient algorithms. And that's what we have done in Universe. We have no energy request in mining. That's what probably Hans did in Hashgraph. So these are new generation systems, and they will replace mining for sure.
Yeah, I was just in Taiwan, and Vitalik was there talking about moving over to proof of stake. And there was a big conversation also about delegated proof of stake. Mm-hmm. Yet another model in which we can create a better efficiency. And I think this is, it'll be interesting to see how it works in the Ethereum world. And I think, moving forward, everyone will start with a maybe different model. There are also other types of mining, and I think that's another thing, to your point, getting people into the blockchain space by allowing them to mine is a huge, huge lift for the entire ecosystem. Sense allows humans who have absolutely no experience whatsoever, no development experience, to mine human data, so their own data and other data throughout the internet, and get rewards for that. And their mining is computing power. They just don't understand that the computer is doing the work.
That's a really interesting point. And I mean, some of these new platforms that are coming along, like if we talk about IOTA, we don't have anyone from IOTA here today, I don't think, but IOTA is designed really to manage the Internet of Things data. There's going to be so much data coming from these different devices, and it's not really feasible to do that on existing blockchains. So if you've got kind of micropayments and large amounts of data coming from individuals, watches or phones or other devices they're using in their house, maybe we need different blockchains for different purposes. So I guess one question is, with all these kind of flourishings of different systems, if a company or an individual decides to build something on one blockchain, what are they going to do if then they realize that they actually should have built it on something else, or they want to combine with another system? Is there going to be a way for these systems to kind of talk to each other?
First of all, we don't see the world with only one blockchain platform. There always will be several solutions for different use cases, for different purposes. And I think in the next year, if you want to build something and you want to use a blockchain as a service, you can address this issue to different platforms. You can build it on Universa, and one of the main things we are going to do next year, we are going to launch some kind of app store. It's a store where you can download predefined templates of smart contracts, predefined applications, and if you want to build application for that environment, that will be convenient to you. If you want to build something private, you may use some other. But I think that there will never be a time when different blockchains will be isolated. All the world's leading platforms, they'll be communicating with each other. That's the future that we see.
So it's going to evolve into a marketplace where you've got sort of blockchain that might compete on speed and transaction processing, another that might compete on being able to manage data or to be customized in certain ways, or on fairness, or on another feature maybe.
So I think, I'm sorry, go ahead. So I think that what we'll see is the technology stack itself to begin to become more differentiated. So for example, you'll have a consensus layer at the bottom, and then sitting on top of that consensus layer, there will be a cryptocurrency, maybe there's storage, maybe there's smart contract technology, and I can see that each one of these components, potentially, will mature in its own right, and the market may end up coalescing around one or a few of these components. So for example, hypothetically, it might be the case that the Ethereum VM becomes the dominant VM, and even though there are other consensus layers in the market, that Ethereum VM may end up being used on top of them, thereby not eliminating all of that or obsoleting all of the scripting that's already been done on top of the VM, right? So I think that we'll see, this always happens as a market technology matures and begins to grow up. We're still very early, and if you look at the Bitcoin code base, the original code base, it's all mushed together, it's all one thing, it's a digital cryptocurrency, right? Well, it's actually a lot of logically independent components, and now those components are being split out, and the stack is being refactored, and we'll benefit from that as an industry as we move forward.
Yeah, I think 2017 is certainly the year of the ICO, and that's the top application ever created on Ethereum is the ICO. So now we have a lot of companies with capital who need to do better work with technology. So I think 2018 is going to be the year of the new chain or the protocol. And then we're going to see things emerge like Gavin Wood's Polkadot that are connecting chains together because we'll encounter that problem. The next step is, now how do we make them all talk to each other? So it's an interesting unfolding as we get this mishmash of everything together. But really, I think that a lot of people and companies that I know, including our own, are looking to the next step after Ethereum. We love and respect Ethereum for everything it's done, but in the future, when we do need better transaction power, we just have to find something else to use.
Yeah, I think I agree with you completely that the layers are going to continue to get more and more split, and you're going to have to solve each problem in a way that isn't mushed together into one fat protocol as it used to be, because that's how the web stack is today, and I think that's how blockchains will continue to evolve as well. And I think things like Polkadot or Cosmos, which creates a hub to interact across blockchains, will continually to grow more and more important because the future is multi-blockchain.
I'm sure there's people in the audience who are probably thinking, I thought there was only kind of one blockchain or one idea of blockchain I had to get my head around, and now I have to get my head around all these different types of blockchains and blockchains without blocks, and it's all very confusing. So I'm going to ask if there's any questions from the audience. We have about 10 minutes left for some Q&A. The chap at the back there. Just wait a second for the mic.
Hello. Hi there. Justin, English. I live in Thailand. Thank you very much, guys. Maxine, that was a very good chat there. Thank you very much. How do I get my free tokens?
You can always find me in the lobby.
See him at the coffee break.
I will do.
See you in 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you
Airdrop.
much. But seriously, thank you very much. And it's really nice hearing all the technical chat. I'm not a technical guy, and hearing in sort of layman terms, it came over very well, all four of you. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you. One right up at the back there, I think.
When are we going to be able to just airdrop tokens to everyone in the audience?
Well, I do remember people trying to give me free Bitcoin back in 2014, and I'm still grateful. So.
Yeah, hi Helen. Perlin from IOTA Foundation. So IOTA is represented.
You are here from IOTA. Great. I didn't know you were
Thanks,
here,
guys.
so welcome.
So a question to Mans. You're a patented technology. Why is that? A lot of people want to know about that.
Yeah.
We're open source, so we have nothing to hide.
Okay. Yeah.
So it begins.
So it begins. So there, people, when they think about open source, they often conflate code review with giving away a license to use indiscriminately, right? And so when and if we have a public chain, there will not be the requirement to have a license to use the network. It will be open for review, and if people want to contribute to the code base, then we would certainly welcome that. What I do see is this in the market today. What I see in the market today is a situation where we have to take advantage of every crisis in order to move the market forward. That is the definition of the Wild West, right? And it's also the reason why this is not yet mainstreamed. I mean, I don't mean to diminish the amazing achievements that have been made to date, and they are amazing, but it's not mainstreamed. And mainstream markets do care about the stability of the platform. And so where does an IP portfolio come into play as it relates to public markets? It makes it possible to do everything that we've done today, but also to give some stability in ways that are required by enterprise class customers, small, medium business customers, and makes it possible to take the whole thing mainstream, which benefits every single person in this room, right? When we have a situation where we have a benevolent dictator in Vitalik Buterin, a form of governance, but the inability to prevent the chain from being split because of the current licensing model. Or we have bicameral governance in terms of the core developers with Bitcoin and the miners, and the inability to prevent chaos in the market because now we have, just in this 1 year, 3 separate chains. That's unsustainable. That will change. And having both technical controls that enable the compelling the markets to adopt changes that are proposed and made by the governing body, as well as legal controls that don't restrict open innovation, but do provide stability that the mainstream markets need, that is the winning combination. And it has nothing to do with hiding. It has to do with moving the entire market forward.
I mean, we haven't really touched on that issue of governance. That's obviously one of the key issues in open platforms is how you actually govern open source development, and it's not easy when you've got a kind of, decentralization is great in many regards, but when the kind of decision making is also decentralized, sometimes it's hard. You get a hard fork situation or a soft fork situation. How do you quickly make a decision what to do to protect people's money? Is that something that you guys want to comment on in terms of public ledgers and governance?
Yeah. I think this is a huge, can you hear me? Okay. I think this is a huge area for us to figure out over the coming years. Like, as much as we want a completely open, public, decentralized network, in the end, it's humans coding up these networks, and it's humans deciding what goes into these networks, and it's humans deciding what changes to make to these networks. And so the governance, as much as we want to codify it and make it open, I think it still requires some group of people to make decisions of what that code involves and what that governance involves. And figuring that out is really hard, because there's one side of the spectrum where a lot of people are kind of want a completely open, decentralized way of doing stuff, and another side that wants more like private, full control over it. And we need some kind of middle ground where there's both code running the rules, and then also people decide a fair way for people to decide what code runs those rules.
Or AI. So I think if we're going to have true autonomy, then AI is the next level. When you have blockchain plus AI, that's where this really takes off. So let's talk again in 3 to 5 years and see how we extract that human layer and provide real autonomy and true decision making that has a smart contract associated with it as well.
We can talk about the rise of the bots later. We'll blow people's minds even more by getting them to understand not just blockchain but also artificial intelligence.
I want to say some words about open source projects versus projects where every God is hidden. In Universa, we are open source, but there are still some parts of our code that we hide. We will open them just in maybe a month or 2. Why do we do that? Because we understand that we are in some competition. But we have to be open source. We want it or not, we have to be, because we are building infrastructure and we need to have 100% support from community. And you can't have 100% support of community if you are not open source. That's why we made our choice in this way.
We've also, we've just recently transitioned from a venture-backed centralized company into an ICO-driven, token-modeled, decentralized company, or primarily decentralized. And it's very difficult to open up that control to the community. So while we do have an open platform now, it starts with API access, and then eventually moving on to full open. It also has IP associated with it. We do have patents, and those patents have to be opened, thereby transitioning IP to the new entities. So we're in a transitionary phase in the world. I think we're moving into a better, more decentralized world, but 100% decentralized would be absolute chaos.
Well, before we get too much into chaos, we have lunch. I just want to end by thanking the panelists. It was a privilege to chair a moderate panel where all of the panelists are far more expert and intelligent than I am. So whether the intelligence is artificial or real, it's been a pleasure, and thank you everyone for being on the panel. Look forward to seeing you after lunch.
Thank you.